You're listening to She's Got Drive podcast, the podcast that inspires women to be the driver in their own life through the life and stories of Black women with drive. And I'm your host, Shirley McAlpine. I'm a business consultant, executive coach, and a leadership facilitator working with people and organizations to live their lives by design and not default. Welcome back to another episode of She's Got Drive. And this episode is another rewind episode, and I'll tell you why. So the 5th of May is the International Day of the Midwife, where it's a day that shines a light on the important work that midwives all around the world do to deliver the world's children. I thought that I would repost my interview with one of the most inspiring midwives in the US, and that is no exaggeration. Now, do I know every single midwife that is in the US? No, I don't. But this woman, Jennie Joseph, who's the CEO of Commonsense Childbirth, based in Florida, has worked tirelessly. You know, in the US, she started her midwifery career in the UK. She's a Brit. And but has been in the US for over 30 years now, I think, and has worked tirelessly through her methodology called the JJ Way to educate and empower and support women to have healthy pregnancies and babies. I met her, I think it was in 2009 or 2010, and I was blown away by her and her commitment and her passion. And why? Because America has the highest maternal mortality rate of any industrialized country in the world. More than 2 women die every day in the USA from pregnancy-related causes, and 3 to 4 times as many Black women as white women are at risk or die during pregnancy. Now, we have read and we have heard of Serena Williams' experience and the challenge that Beyonce faced when she was having the twins. In Homecoming, she talks about that, which is just a whole nother episode. No, that's just another episode that I plan to write about what my lessons from Homecoming, but let's just stick with this. The issues for Black women across socioeconomic boundaries, crosses socioeconomic boundaries. So the fact that you're educated and rich, for example, have got more than enough resources to buy the best healthcare, does not mean that as Black women that you're not going to face challenges in pregnancy and in childbirth. Babies, the infant mortality rate as well is high in the USA as well. And Black women and people of color face real challenges in this area, and our babies are dying at a rate that it really shouldn't be happening in an industrialized country. Jennie has worked so hard in this arena for many, many years I know there's many other people working in it, but it's important for us to raise our awareness around it. I've had, of course, Kimberly Seals-Allers. We talked about it in her episode as well. I am passionate about this, I don't know if you can tell. And so I've worked over the number of years with midwives, providing leadership development and coaching and so on since 2009, because I'm passionate about this, because it's important to raise the awareness about something that is preventable with our education, that we can demand more and better of the healthcare system. And it's important to give a platform to Black women so that they could share their experiences and educate and empower communities to push for change. The change is going to come from the ground up. And I know, I want to shout out to every one of you who is listening, who fight for change in this arena, in this important domain. And so I wanted to honor you and honor your work and honor the mothers and babies who really deserve better and need better. And so with that, I decided that I would repost the Jennie Joseph interview that I did. Jennie is also a national speaker, an author. She's been featured in documentaries about this important issue. She's hosted her own radio talk show and is a regular guest on other shows. There's been research done on her work as well, because she's so outstanding in the results that she's producing that is really usurping the norms that are for Black women in this country. And so in honor of International Day of the Midwife, I give you Jennie Joseph. So shall we start with what you understand or success to be, you know, if you think about what it means for you?
That's a good one. Well, I think it changes for me what it means. It's sort of morphing, sometimes daily even. It's fluid. So I would say that I feel in some ways very successful in my particular field, in my genre, women's health, midwifery. And then on the other hand, as a CEO, I feel like I've got so far to go to say I've reached that success. But for me, success is a place where, if you ever arrive there, that it's just a complete, it's very part of who you are. It's sort of very natural. It feels good. It feels comfortable, like you're where you wanted to be, and that you are just completely living in that way. It's a state of being almost. Yeah.
So at what point do you think you arrived at that state of being in your chosen field?
Wow. Just recently. Just recently. But over the course of many years, there's been these sort of smaller steps to a level of success. And so I feel like I've achieved as I've gone along. And then on the other hand, I look back and I say, no, not quite yet. And then for the future, I want more. So, you know, I keep moving the bar, so to speak. But I think I could say for sure when I got a license in Florida, for example, that was one major success because I was told, no, you can't. Like, it won't happen. Like, oh, no. And so I was very clear about and intentional about, no, I'm going to get a license. Right. So, for example, becoming actually the first foreign trained midwife that got a license in Florida since the Midwifery Act had been closed down, that was a real triumph for me and I think a measure of success. But that was just one piece, because in having the license, having the piece of paper and actually being able to utilize it to get to work in the field that I'd chosen, I wasn't actually really able to get to work in the way I wanted to get to work inside of that. So there wasn't success in that, because all of a sudden I was faced with, you have a piece of paper, you're able to be let loose, if you will, but now what are you going to do? Right. Because the recognition of what that license meant in Florida versus what it meant for me when I was in England was that, oh, this is a different midwife. Okay. So that changed there for me as far as the success of that.
It sounds like when you use that example is that, you know, success, you achieve one thing and then there's the next level anyway. Yes. That you then create for yourself.
Right, and it can also be created for you because it develops out of where you are at that particular moment. Right. So some of it was purposeful. I might set a goal or I set out to achieve something, and others were just like, this is what has to happen now. Like, you've got there, so now you must go to this next thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going there, then you kind of would be, that sense of just, well, you're stuck. So, the success piece was either part of the next, just naturally, organically movement forward, or it was, no, I really want to do X, so I'm going to work towards that.
Right. So then how much of the work and your accomplishments then have been planned, and how much of has been organic, because many people have 3-year plans, 5-year plans and visions for themselves, and they're working away at that. So how much of it has been organic for you?
I would say all of it, honestly. I think because I got here, I landed in 89 and I had no clue. I just literally, I was excited to come to the States. I came to be married. I met my husband to be, the year before, and he came to England and proposed, and I was so giddy and excited and thrilled to accept, and I came back with my 3-year-old in tow, and it was the beginning of this new era, and I was very, very excited about all the possibilities, and in those moments, I didn't stop to think about, and the career path piece. Right. Because I'd been a midwife for 10 years before I arrived, and I assumed that Americans had babies. And I was like, well, how else would you have a baby but with a midwife, which is normal around the rest of the entire world. So I get off a plane, I'm like, let me find the hospital because I'm going to get signed up because I'm going to start my shifts, and I'm going to have a job, and everything's going to be lovely. And so, no, it wasn't at all. And so the beginning changes had to come organically because there was nothing else for me to do but kind of work my way through it, figure my way through it, meet the obstacles, and then have the obstacles kind of guide me. And then on the other hand, also, determine that I wasn't going to let these systems and these blocks beat me. So it did sort of organically develop. And, as I began to see the future, I began to lay out plans for myself. I didn't actually know how I was going to get there.
Right.
But I would make these plans. In fact, recently I found a couple of things where I'd written out these 10-year goals. And actually, I'm not that badly far off. It's really interesting to see something that was quite outrageous that I've written down that I would have done, 10 years ago. Oh,
Yes.
I'm going to do this. And then not have any kind of plan towards it, but then go back and see, like I've got one where I'm about 3 years away, 2018 would have been when it was due. And it was quite an ambitious goal, but I had it written down in 2008. And I surprised myself because quite a bit of it has been achieved without any real plan.
Right.
So, there's that part of it where it just unfolds, the next thing, and now the next thing, and then, now the next thing. And then there's the other piece where you drive it somewhat, but not necessarily, for me personally, I don't necessarily have the ability maybe or the way of being where I, lay it out by minuscule and minutiae. I don't put all those details in there, but it just happens.
So what has you keep on going and keep on
Well,
achieving?
I think what has me keep working forward is that I just can't settle. I'm just not that person. I get to a certain point and I'm like, no, this is not enough.
Okay.
I need more of this, or it ought to be, or it's not right that. There's something there for me at each juncture that has me go, okay, hold on a minute. If only this piece was in place, it would be better. Or it would work better for other people, perhaps for the patients, the women, the families. Or this isn't right, we can't have that.
Yeah.
So what can I do about it?
Right.
So those kinds of things come up and somewhat keep driving me forward. But it was extremely difficult because I sort of had to reinvent myself to manage what I met when I arrived. I had to create almost inside of this place where there was nothing as far as midwifery at the time. It was 1989. And so the Midwifery Practice Act in Florida had actually been closed down. So midwives like myself who are not nurses were not actually licensed or legal. Nurse midwives who could work in hospitals were already practicing and had a way, an access point to practice. So I didn't want to do a nurse midwifery training all over again. I felt very frustrated and affronted even that was a suggestion because I'd been a midwife for 10 years inside of a hospital environment, even though I was what we consider a non-nurse or a direct entry midwife, meaning that we didn't do the nursing as the first discipline but went directly into midwifery. So I found that very frustrating when I came, where I had to be told, well, you should go to school and do this, or you should go to school and do the other, or you have to start from scratch, or what are you talking about? So I was met with a lot of consternation. Many people threw their hands up and said, oh, no, we don't do that anymore. This is old. And, referral back to the day, when the grand midwives were delivering babies at home, and the history of it all began to unfold. So it was extremely difficult, extremely frustrating, and I found it hard to keep fighting at that point. I was very overwhelmed. I was depressed for a long time. I ended up compromising and working in a physician's office, an OB physician's office.
Right.
I thought that would be as close as I could get to doing the work I loved. But it was interesting because that became the catalyst for me to actually get out and find a way to go back to my roots and go back to midwifery. The experience in that physician's office was so horrendous. It was such an eye-opening experience because I had no clue that, one, women could be treated that way, two, that the medical system was so upside down in the United States, and that, three, the disparities in the type of care, depending on your race or your socioeconomic status, was so apparent. And unfortunately, I got so caught up, I actually became a victim of the same system because when I had something that was going on for me gynecologically, I foolishly thought that I would work with the physician that I was employed by.
Right.
And that ended up in quite the disaster and led me down a road to just completely, essentially ending up, I consider myself a victim of some of these, I think, quite predatory behaviors that happen to women who haven't got any power in the United States. So that was the impetus, though, for me to say, that's it. Back to midwifery, back to find a way. Find a way. Because we can't have this be all that's available. We can't have this be that women are so disenfranchised. All women, but particularly poor women, women of color, women who are powerless in the general society that is the United States. So that forced me to look outside of where I had sort of landed myself, where I put myself as if this was all I could have. And I realized, no, you know what? There's got to be a way. And that came from the history. That came from learning and understanding women who'd gone before me and their struggles. And realizing that those struggles had come full circle, that they were still playing out, that it was a vicious cycle. And there wasn't really much of a way to break in. But yet I was inspired by the fact that how they had broken in when it was their circle, their time.
Yeah.
Like if they hadn't have done what they did, many women, families, communities would have totally been destroyed. It's really quite an interesting fact. But if you think about it, African American midwives from slavery onwards delivered America. Immigrant midwives delivered America.
Until there was
Until the physicians came in and said, hold up a minute, there's a way here, perhaps for us to have a little bit more power, a little bit more revenue, a little bit more control. And it started encouraging women into the hospitals. And, making sure that people understood the midwives were illiterate and they were drunken and they were dirty and they were unkempt and they were unsafe. And the smear campaign was so successful. We still feel the repercussions today.
Right, because there are only, is it something like 10% of births are out of hospital births in the United States, which is really a small percentage. When you talk about the your experience of working in that obstetrician's office, and it speaks to sometimes when we come off our path, we come off our mission, if you like, and our purpose, but we can get back on path, But it was like a wake-up call for you then, and it seems like it acted as a big catalyst for where you are today, that experience.
That was the one thing that brought me back to don't give up, don't let go of who you are. My midwifery practice in England wasn't anything like my current midwifery practice. I was a hospital midwife. I was happy with my shift, loved it. I loved to be able to go home when I was done. I liked my 6 weeks of paid vacation. I liked that there was a hierarchy. I liked that there was a collaborative approach to obstetric care. I liked having an understanding from the general public that midwifery was what happens around normal birth and maternity care.
Yeah,
I liked all these things.
The way that we give birth in the UK, isn't
and
it?
in the rest of Europe and pretty well the rest of the world. So I was fine with everything as it was, and so I didn't come here looking to be the independent midwife, which I've since become. I didn't come here looking to be an entrepreneur. Wasn't interested in any of that. I didn't come here looking to be the owner of a birthing center or an outreach clinic. I didn't want to do public health. I just wanted to do what I've been doing, which I loved and had been doing since I was 19 years old. So I was 30 when I arrived. And at this juncture, 26 years hence, I am still in shock of how the system is around maternity care. And it was that particular change that set me on this trajectory. It's been a series of things that have me do a hard stop and say, okay, a new direction. And, along the way, those new directions have me set a new version of what I think success might look like. And also how I might get there. One of the things that is quite shocking and eye-opening is that the maternal health and illness around pregnancy in the United States has us standing quite low rank lowly ranked in the world. So recently we were 60th in the world ranking for maternal mortality, meaning mothers dying having babies in the United States. And the part that's really scary about that is that the number is actually worse. So each year it's getting worse rather than improving. Many other countries, and particularly developing nations where you'd expect that there's an issue around maternal health and maternal death, those numbers are improving. Now they're markedly larger than ours, but we are at the stage now where 2 to 3 mothers die every day in the United States around pregnancy and birth. That's one thing. But the other piece, which is almost like America's dirty little secret, if you will, is that there's around 40 to 50,000 what they're calling near-miss experiences every year, meaning you almost died.
Yeah.
You didn't quite. You made it through, but by the skin of your teeth. So let me put that in another way. That means there are women who are leaving the hospital after having a baby, but they're leaving from the ICU. They're leaving from the cardiac care unit.
Right.
They're not leaving from the postpartum floor because they never made it to the postpartum. They went straight from labor to the ICU. There's something very insidious in a system that has that amount of money being spent and has these outcomes. And then the flip side of that, of course, is that the babies, the infants, are also in jeopardy. If a mother is sick, her baby might be lost or also very sick.
Right.
And the biggest situation that we face is the prematurity rate and the low birth weight rate. It's outrageous. And we're around the 40s, 41st, I believe, in the world as far as infant mortality.
Right.
And unfortunately, 2 to 3 times as many of those babies are usually African American. And in the mother's case, 3 to 4 times as many are African American as compared to white.
Yeah.
Something going on here.
Out of all that you've been working on, then, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment today? Because it's a huge undertaking.
Well, and it's interesting because I didn't set out to deal with that particular issue in that way. I set out to get myself back up on my feet and be the midwife. That's really where I started. Like, okay, what do I have to do? And I started a home birth practice initially because that was the quickest route into entrepreneurship, the most affordable route into entrepreneurship. I started small. I had my little one-man band. Here comes midwife Jennie. I'll come to your house.
Right.
And so I would do home visits. I delivered babies at home. And I had these elite few women who wanted that service. They looked for me. They found me. I didn't even have to advertise. And the word of mouth carried the practice, and it grew. And it was wonderful. But it wasn't diverse enough for me. I was wondering, where are the women of color? Where are these women who, from different groups? And they were not showing up. I was mainly working with women who were quite affluent, who were educated, who were insured, who were supported, who were Caucasian. And there was nothing wrong with that. I loved every minute, but it wasn't really what I was looking to do. So when I took on growing that piece of the practice, I said, well, can I bring in other women, more diverse women, and perhaps if they don't want a home birth, maybe they'll have their baby at the hospital as they seemingly wanted to do. And that opened up a whole new way of providing the care. And in doing care that way for those women who weren't looking for the home natural birth, they wanted an epidural, or they wanted to go in the hospital and spend a couple of days. They wanted access to what they felt was safe with. I opened up the idea of doing clinic for them, letting them have, not letting, but supporting them having a choice of hospital delivery and then coming back postpartum.
Right.
And it worked. I literally diversified the practice. I was obviously willing to take Medicaid and, work out payment plans and do free care where it was needed. But what happened was, as we began to gather the information of the outcomes, the birth data, we saw that these women just happenstance, they were having full-term babies. They were having better birth outcomes, getting a vaginal birth versus a C-section. They were breastfeeding. That just happened as a byproduct of saying, well, why don't we just provide this care?
Right.
Like, let's get over this, it's all about the birth room, or, we all have to have a water birth, or, let's get some lavender oil, and, it was like, never mind all that. What do women want? And women said, we want prenatal care. It's not that we don't want the care, we just can't get into prenatal care. We can't get access to care. We're going through all these hoops and hurdles trying to work our way around systems that are quite obstructive to that goal. I mean, it's very ironic. The throwing up other hands. Oh, these women, they're so bad, they're so wrong, they don't care. Yet actually, when you try to access the system, I mean, heaven help you. Good luck. It is so set up in a way that it's quite difficult. And then if you do get in, there's certain other barriers that will pop up very quickly, such as, well, Dr. So-and-so doesn't take that type of insurance, or you've got to go, 3 bus routes over to get this care at this time, or you just don't know how long you're going to wait, or, on and on and on. So it began to be apparent that it wasn't necessarily that women were having poor outcomes because of their wanton disregard for themselves or their children. It was more a matter of, there's a system here set up a certain way, perhaps on purpose or perhaps to be being sustained at this certain way, that has women have such an option, have so few options that they're ending up with these outcomes. I then was able to connect that back to my experience years earlier when I worked for the OB and realized there's a connection here. That system that I was part of, that I ended up with my own issues, as well as I watched as other women had other similar issues inside of that OB practice, began to realize it was bigger than just private physicians, that it was institutionalized.
Right.
And so again, more research, more investigation, more looking at the history, trying to connect the dots and working out that somehow what we were doing in terms of providing this limited, really, midwifery care for the average woman who wanted just a healthy outcome for herself and her baby. What we were doing was impacting the outcomes so much, so strongly, that we then began to say, there's a system of care that we've developed, sort of inadvertently, that could be applied by anybody.
And that's the JJ way. That's
right.
I came up define it the JJ way, and so you've been able to use that model here in Florida, and that has saved babies, that has saved mothers.
It's hard to be able to gauge it, but absolutely, when you have a comparative statistic that says the county that we work in, or even the state that we're working in, we compare the statistics for women of the same demographic. We're talking about some outrageous numbers. We're talking about 18 or 20% of likelihood of having a premature infant if you're a certain race or a certain demographic. And so we compared our study, because we ran a study in 2006, 2007, of 100 of the women that were enrolled in this outreach clinic that we were doing. And we just enrolled them prospectively. We made sure that we just literally asked if they would be willing to participate.
Right.
We signed them up as they came in as a new patient, and waited to see what happened after the delivery. And we were somewhat blown away, because of that cohort of women, of the African American and Hispanic women in that group, we came back with a 0. Not one premature, not one low birth weight baby out of the whole lot.
Right.
And then we looked, well, let's look at the statistics for this year with the same demographic of women. So we looked at the African American women, and it was 19.2%, I believe, that year for prematurity.
In Florida?
In Florida.
Okay.
0. So it wasn't like, oh, look how wonderful, we've dropped it down to 15. Oh, look, we've got to 13, how amazing. Gone. These were women who were not looking for midwifery, who were not coming with the best of nutrition and the best of, options, and were high on the socioeconomic scale. These were everyday women who were like, I can't get in over here. Dr. So-and-so threw me out. I don't have any money. I'm undocumented. I just arrived. Whatever was their story, they were those women who would typically populate these statistics.
Right. And you were able to turn that around.
And that was just applying the model.
Given that's a huge, that's a huge accomplishment. You've been in practice now for...
I'm in my 36th year.
Okay. How many babies have you delivered?
Well, see, I stopped counting. A lot. Thousands. I don't know.
Babies,
a long time.
Thousands of babies.
A lot of babies.
Those babies are about to deliver their
own babies. Oh,
right?
yes. I'm a grandma midwife, yes.
Thousands of babies. So what would you say is your biggest accomplishment?
I'm going to say that it was that we came up with a system that was tight enough and was that you could replicate, that you could duplicate, that anyone could apply it. You didn't have to be a certain type of provider. It's basically a patient-centered model, a family-centered model, a woman-centered model.
Okay.
It involves just having some humility, having some compassion, having some human kindness, little things to tweak that didn't cost any money at all, right? There's no money in that way of being.
Okay.
But applying that consistently across the board and engaging the staff to join in with me. So as we've grown and we now have 8 on our staff, right? But the one criteria to work here is that you have to join in. You have to be willing to embrace the culture that we create. And the culture is simply this: you're going to have a full-term healthy baby. Like, that's not an option. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
So the staff joining in became the system, because the system isn't anything fancy or deep or, arduous. It's simply this: will you stand with us? Will you hold this space for this? And do you have fun while you're doing it? Because if you do, you're in, and we can work together. And that has turned this thing into this system. But what was really great was that the women were the recipients of this. They were thrilled. Most of them cried. Most of them were overwhelmed. They couldn't believe. They were incredulous. They told their friends. They ran into the streets and said, "Come back. Come here.
So
We know this will happen for you too." And so inside of that, as an accomplishment, if you will, I would say that was probably the top, that it happened. And it continues to happen. Like, it's consistent. And that we can say, this is how you do it.
So what is it about you that's managed to lead in this way, that's managed to develop to get where you are?
I don't know if it's about me. And I think there are others. And there's a uniqueness of this configuration of these pieces. But I think across this nation, there are many that have configured their own way of that.
Okay.
I think midwifery itself lends itself to being a very patient-centered, woman-centered approach. There's listening, and there's respect, and there's time, and there's, there's care. So I don't know that it's me specifically, because I don't own the midwifery model of care.
Okay.
Now I like to think I'm like this consummate midwife that since I was breathing, I knew, and, I've been waiting my whole life.
Yeah.
And, what I mean? I've never done anything else, and I don't want to, ever. Like, that's going to always be the foundation of anything I do, is that way of being. So I'm not really sure how to answer that, but I think that, I've never had any other doubt or feeling that that's how I could and should operate. Like, that, as I grew into adulthood, it was there, and it stayed with me. Like, I won't stand for silly nonsense, and I won't stand for wrong, and I won't stand for unfairness, and I won't stand for cruelty, like these certain things. And I met that, I felt, in what was going on in the maternity care and the women's health care. I met that here. So I had to go against that. Like, it wasn't an option to, now look what I've learned, but never mind. Let me go, and maybe I'll try some secretarial work. That wasn't going to happen.
So what would you say is the source of your success then?
When I see something that I maybe with effort and energy could fix or change, then I'm driven. So right now, I think what's going on for me is that I'm looking at, I want a successful nonprofit organization, and I want to expand this work and the opportunity for others to do this work in their town, city, their neighborhoods, however they want to do it. So now I'm looking at, that comes from wanting this to happen. So my success, the goal that I have is to get a national program up, running, and sustained. I do have an element of me where I'm just go. Like, I'm in action. That's part of who I am, I think. And so
as long as you're in action,
I'm good.
I feel like you're being pulled.
Yes, I agree. I feel that too.
Into like this future. So what do you say to someone who has that pull, but we can get in our own way? What do you say to that person?
Pace yourself and have a sense of self-care along the way. I've been very much so pulled and so passionate that I've abandoned that side. and it's not sustainable. That piece I'm clear about now, that the self-care and pacing so that you can achieve and answer that call and be in that passion. Those two things go together. And I don't think I saw that as clearly as I do now all these years ago. In fact, I think they were totally separate in my mind, that one thing had to do with the other. Like, never even came to my, consciousness that is an integral piece to being able to answer the call.
Yeah. What advice would you give to your younger self? If Jennie, the 25-year-old or something, was sitting in front of you, what would you tell her?
Honestly, truthfully, I would say slow it down. Stay present. I miss so much. I went so fast. I miss so much. Yeah. Slow it down.
So
stay in the moment.
You've got some sadness, it looks like, around missing that.
Yeah. Because you can't get it back. And you don't have, nothing's promised. So you could just literally, and we all have that, where you blink your eye and like, I can't believe so-and-so's grown, or I can't believe, these things have happened. And it was so fast. So fast. I'm going to be 57, and I'm like, well, how did that happen? Like, huh? So slow it down.
All right.
Just be in the moment. And that also that the success, if you will, can be redefined. It's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be what you thought it was going to be, or it doesn't have to look like. It's yours to just redefine.
Yes, yeah, that's so great. You're not set. It's not.
Yes.
Well, which kind of speaks to the whole thing. You're great at not being wedded to one idea, right?
Yes.
So you can totally reinvent yourself. You can totally reinvent your goal.
Yes.
And if that one doesn't, you can totally do that inside of your purpose. Like, let's go here, let's go there.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to be stuck.
I hope that you've been inspired to shift gears in your own life. I love this interview with Jennie because she shares with us what things that we should know about in terms of the statistics and where we are as Black women in giving birth in the US, as compared to our white counterparts, as compared to the rest of the world. And but we also hear her own personal journey to her work and her commitment and her passion for her work. So, a big thank you again to Jennie. She was I think she was my first interview beyond the Apollo ones, and I really appreciate and love her work. And so I'm just have so much respect for her. So I'm really pleased that I'm reposting this, and I hope that you got a lot from it. Please share this episode with anyone that you know who is interested in having children, is committed to people who have children, who is works in the healthcare industry, who are, as Black women, we all need to know about it, whether we are mothers ourselves, plan to be mothers, aunties, sisters, daughters, all. It really needs to be widely, sister friends, widely shared, so that we can educate and we can really do something from the ground up to challenge the situation in the healthcare system around Black women and how we are having babies in the US. Is just it leaves me speechless sometimes. As you can see, I'm really passionate about it, but we need to get it out there, and we need to educate ourselves, and we need to empower ourselves in this. So please share this show and share it next week and put it around, like really let people know about it. And if you are loving She's Got Drive podcast, and you've got a lot from it, this episode and previous episodes, then please do rate and review the show. It really matters. So when you do a rating and make a comment,
on the show. It really helps to grow the show and to increase people's awareness of the show. So thank you so much for those of you who've done it. Thank you so much for your messages to me as well. I appreciate it so much. So please share the show. And yeah, so, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me on my Instagram account, Shirley McAlpine, or there's always the She's Got Drive Facebook page as well. You can send messages there. And I love to get your comments and see what you're doing with the podcast and what you're learning and what you're implementing in your life. So please get in contact with me. She's Got Drive is produced by Cassandra Voltalina. The music is by the awesome all-female band Blonde. The song is called Circles. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, go well and stay well.